When is it okay to TPK? Answer, never. That was an easy one.
Kurt, you're gonna have to do a little bit more talking than that. Sit back down.
Okay. When is it okay to TPK? Well, let's break this down a little bit. What is a TPK? Total party kill. You are a keeper, you are a referee, you are a GM, dungeon master, doesn't matter what you call it, doesn't matter what the system is. You're playing a game and all of the party dies. That's it. Done. Every character dead. Benito. Is that okay? Well, why am I bringing this subject up? Well, because in a forum chat on Facebook recently, someone was saying, I think I'm going to have a TPK on my hands. What do I do? Go back, see my last GM tips if you haven't seen it already. But I was reading the actual commentary inside, people responding to this gentleman, and one of them said, I TPK at least twice in my campaigns. It's the way that the players know that there's risk. I think we can talk about risk in an entirely different chapter, but this particular gentleman caught my attention. I purposefully TPK. I purposely wipe out all of my player characters at least twice a campaign to create risk. My reaction was colourful. I didn't actually type anything down because I didn't trust myself to actually do so eloquently, professionally, and not get myself banned from Facebook. So, putting that to one side, it did definitely conjure an interesting topic to me. Is it okay to TPK? Now, let me just say right from the get-go, no, I don't think it is. But let me expand on that just a little bit. First and foremost, I'm not talking about convention games or games purposely set up where a TPK is part of the fun, or the risk of a TPK is part of the fun. I'm talking about you going into the Temple of Elemental Evil. I'm talking about that you're doing some kind of dungeon crawl classic where people are going to die, everyone knows they're going to die. Maybe it's a convention game, maybe it's a Call of Cthulhu convention game run by Skeeter Green, and the risk of death or insanity or other is high, and you kind of do it for that 4-hour bite-sized enjoyment. It's like, can we survive the dungeon? Can we survive this particular GM's nefarious plans? That's one thing. That's one type of fun. Likewise, it's okay if you're in a group where you're churning through the characters and the GM is throwing massive things at you and there's big battles, there's deaths everywhere, body parts flying. That's okay too. Are you having fun out of it? Absolutely. I don't, though, think that that's the norm, if we're going to be fair. The norm is a collection of players, real people with real lives, sit down together in a social environment to have fun. That fun within a tabletop RPG game is that of creating characters, camaraderie, but also seeing our characters grow, accomplish things together, seeing a story unfurl, and you become these little heroes fighting the bad guy, but the world starts coming alive in front of you. It becomes what I feel very strongly is a storybook, right? And one of the best things I think about GMing is you're never quite sure, as a GM, where the story's going to go. Like, you're turning the book with the players, and you're seeing characters being introduced, you're seeing how they're going to be adopted, how they actually grow themselves. In other words, this tabletop RPG becomes our story. It becomes our book. And we're all enjoying that journey together. We become invested in it. As a GM, as a GM, you become invested in it. Your time, your effort, but there's an emotional energy that you put in. Well, it's the same for players. It's no different for players. They become attached to their characters. They start, the good players, really start to like get into the shoes of their characters, start to try and think like their characters, how would they do react to certain situations. As we get more and more mature in our role playing, we actually try to deviate from our intrinsic personality and have a different personality. It's escapism. This becomes almost an extension of me, but it is also an alternative, right? And I think that is important. The fact that our players becoming attached to the characters and the story in which those characters are now an integral part. If, as a dungeon master, you now kill them all, it is not simply that you have paused or reset your game. It is not simply that those characters are dead, let's bring in new ones. What have we done with the attachment that the players had with those characters? It's bad enough if one player loses a character, right? It happens, but you know there's a sadness and a loss. Now extend that to 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 players, all in one go. You have disrupted your game, you've disrupted the arc of the narrative, you've disrupted all of the virtual characters that were interacting with the now deceased, and the players are going to feel bummed. They're going to feel bummed even if the TPK was a complete accident. Now, I'm not saying actively like bend the rules to avoid TPKs. I think a little bending is okay. But what I'm saying is it shouldn't be by design. And that guy in that thread, I'm looking at you when I say that, because that's bloody awful. You're basically saying, I as a GM don't care about my players' enjoyment. I don't care about whether they have connectivity between all of my plot hooks and characters and locations in the world. I'm going to kill them so they know who's boss. And that's a bad attitude, and you should feel bad. Get to the corner of the room. For the rest of us, a TPK can be an accident. I've had 2 in 30 or 40 years of GMing. Don't feel good about either. Even, I remember the first one. Like it was yesterday. And I still feel bad about it because I felt like that was a miscalculation on my part. The encounter was too tough for what the party were going to be capable of doing. The second one wasn't my fault. It was a tough encounter, yes. And I think in certain systems, when you get to a certain power level, it can become very 50-50, right? If the party doesn't get that little bit of luck that they need, or doesn't have the strategy that they need, it will go south fast. And that I think is a fair comment with most systems. The players might have just a bit of an off day. The dice are not with them. Maybe not quite thinking things through properly. Maybe they missed, an obvious clue or something. Net result, suddenly the fight goes against them. And with high-level fights, powerful fights where a lot of powerful things being thrown around, that can mean death fast. And that was the last TPK I had was that situation. The players just got in over their heads. They could have backed out of the situation. They chose not to. They chose to stand, and they got wiped. Do I feel good about the TPK? No. Do I particularly feel bad about it? No. But my players didn't feel particularly bad about it either, because they recognized that they got themselves into it. So when is a TPK okay? When everyone at the table knows it's a possibility and coming. Now everyone is in agreement. It is not okay if the only person that knows it's happening is the GM, and it's some kind of malicious whip crack, abusive parents type bullshit. That's not okay. It's okay if it's by accident, but learn from it. As a GM, learn from it. What went wrong? How do you adjust in the future? I think as a GM, if you do have a TPK on your hands, recognizing if the players are okay with it or not, recognizing whether they're aware of how it became a TPK is fundamental, and then dropping out of game to have a social interaction with your players, your fellow human beings, your fellow gamers, is the next course of action. Okay guys, what do we do here? We can stop the game. We can generate new characters that perhaps are aware of what these characters were doing and want to carry the torch. Do we do something completely different? But you have that conversation a little bit like a session 0, where you talk about what your game is going to be and the parameters of the game and so on and so forth. But now do it later. Have another session 0 and talk to your players. They're part of this. And decide what the next steps are. So what do you think? Have you ever been part of a TPK? Have you ever GM'd a TPK? If you have, let me know the circumstances down in the comments below and how you handled it and managed to move forwards. Very, very curious. If you're enjoying these and this conversation, please consider hitting the subscribe button down below. And check out my Patreon. We're doing wonderful things over there. I'm giving away maps components, the tricks of the trade of how I actually do those, and lots of behind the scenes news and glimpses of what the public don't get to see. Much love to you all. I'm going to see you at the next gaming table. Keep rolling those dice.